Pocket Evolution, Things You Should Know, Questions and Answers, by Rumi Michael Lee. Introduction. I would like to thank and congratulate you for listening to this book, Pocket Evolution, Things You Should Know, Questions and Answers. This book will give you a good general knowledge about the essentials of evolution. Chapter 1. 1. Define evolution. Evolution is the gradual modification of the genetic composition of a population. 2. Name a factor that proves evolution. The presence of fossils. 3. Explain evolutionism. Evolutionism is the concept that species are gradually drifting from each other by natural selection. 4. Who found the concept of evolutionism? Charles Darwin. 5. What is adaptation? Adaptation is the modification of the structures favorable to the survival of an organism. 6. What is adaptive radiation? Adaptive radiation is the rapid emergence of many species from a common ancestor. 7. What are species? Species are similar organisms that can reproduce together and have offsprings that can also reproduce. 8. What is coevolution? Coevolution is the reciprocal changes and evolution between two species. 9. What is variation? Variation is the difference in DNA. 10. What is morphology? Morphology is the form, shape, and structure of living organisms. Chapter 2. 1. How many species have been identified? Over 1.5 million species have been identified. 2. Half of the identified species are insects. 3. What is taxonomy or systematics? Taxonomy or systematics is the classification of species. 4. Why is the old classification of species false? The old classification of species is false because it assumes that some species are more important than others, and normally, there is no order of importance. Each species has different functions and is also as important. 5. What is the main difference between eukaryotes and prokaryotes? Eukaryotes have a true nucleus, but prokaryotes do not have a true nucleus. 6. According to biochemistry, molecular biology, and microbiology, what are the ancestors of all living things? Prokaryotes. 7. What are the oldest known fossils? Prokaryotes. 8. What is the great success of prokaryotes? Prokaryotes can reproduce quickly in a favorable environment. 9. What is uniformitarianism? Uniformitarianism is a concept that the Earth's surface was gradually shaped by forces such as erosion, etc. 10. What is the orthogenetic theory? Orthogenetic theory is the theory that states that natural selection is not required for evolution. Chapter 3. 1. What is natural selection? Natural selection consists of the traits that make an organism best suited to an environment. 2. Name 2 conditions that favor natural selection. A population that is being predated, and a population where there is not enough resource. 3. What are the 3 types of natural selection? The 3 types of natural selection are disruptive selection, directional selection, and stabilizing selection. 4. What is a disruptive selection? A disruptive selection is a selection that eliminates intermediate types, so it favors both extremes. 5. What is a stabilizing selection? A stabilizing selection is the selection that favors the characteristics of the intermediate types. 6. What is a directional selection? A directional selection is the selection that favors one extreme direction. 7. What is an artificial selection? An artificial selection is the selective breeding of plants and animals chosen by humans. 8. Where are artificial selections used? Artificial selections are used in animal domestication and agriculture. 9. What is emigration? Emigration is when an organism moves out into another location. 10. What is immigration? Immigration is when an organism moves into a new location. Chapter 4. 1. Explain fixism. Fixism is the concept that species are created from the beginning by God. 2. Explain the concept of the inheritance of acquired characters. The concept of the inheritance of acquired characters is the concept that acquired characters can be passed from one generation to the next. 3. Who found the concept of the inheritance of acquired characters? Lamarck. 4. What example did Lamarck give for acquired characters? The stretching of giraffe. 5. Explain spontaneous generation. Spontaneous generation is the concept that explains the spontaneous occurrence of microorganisms in certain nutrient medium. 6. Explain totalitarian heredity. Totalitarian heredity is the concept that speaks of homunculus, where there is not much female participation. 7. Why was Stanley Miller's test a half-fail? Stanley Miller's test was a half-fail because there was no appearance of life in the test tubes, but substances of life. 8. What were the substances of life in the Stanley Miller test? Amino acids, carbohydrates, lipids, etc. 9. Explain the Soma-German concept. The Soma-German concept is the concept that only germ cells transmit hereditary traits, and that acquired traits cannot be transmitted. 10. Who found the concept of Soma-German? Weismann. 11. Who found the concept in response to the spontaneous generation that life always comes from life? Louis Pasteur. 12. Who found the particular inheritance of genes? Mendel. Chapter 5. 1. What is a mineral? A mineral is a homogeneous crystalline solid with a precise chemical formula. 2. What is a rock? A rock is a mixture of several minerals. 3. Name the 3 types of rocks. Sedimentary rocks, magmatic rocks, and metamorphic rocks. 4. How are sedimentary rocks formed? Sedimentary rocks are formed by the gradual solidification of the debris of rocks torn off by erosion. 5. How are magmatic rocks formed? Magmatic rocks are formed by increasing temperature with depth and rocks from very high temperatures, which form magmas. 6. How are metamorphic rocks formed? Metamorphic rocks are formed at the depth of the Earth due to high temperatures and high pressures which rise to its surface following geological phenomenons. 7. What is stratigraphy? Stratigraphy is the study of stratified rocks. 8. What is paleontology? Paleontology is the scientific study of fossils. 9. What is a fossil? A fossil is a prehistoric remain of living organisms. 10. What is half-life? Half-life is the time a radioactive substance has its activity reduced by a factor of 2. Chapter 6. 1. Explain the paleontological evidence of evolution. It is when the hard parts, the skeletons, the shells, of the sediments of the living organisms transform little by little to rock. 2. What is relative dating? Relative dating is when we date the rocks in relation to each other. 3. What is absolute dating? Absolute dating is when many igneous rocks form when the lava that cools contains radioactive elements. 4. Name the two Earth's crust. Continental crust and oceanic crust. Chapter 7. 1. What is the smallest biological unit that can evolve over time? The population. 2. What is anagenesis? Anagenesis is the evolution of a species without the splitting of the species. 3. What is cladogenesis? Cladogenesis is the evolution of a species with the splitting of the species. 4. Define phylogeny. Phylogeny is the history of the evolutional development of an organism. 5. What are clades? Clades are organisms that share a common ancestor. 6. What is biogeography? Biogeography is the study of the geographical distribution of plants and animals. 7. What is gradualism? Gradualism is a gradual change that occurs in species over a long period of time. 8. What is diversity? Diversity is a variety in a species. 9. What is heredity? Heredity is the passing down of traits from one generation to another. 10. What are alleles? Alleles are specific gene variations. Chapter 8. 1. What is a trait? A trait is an inherited character. 2. What are acquired traits? Acquired traits are learned traits. 3. Give an example of an acquired trait. Learning to write is an acquired trait. 4. What are inherited traits? Inherited traits are traits that we were born with. 5. Give an example of an inherited trait. The color of the eyes. 6. What is mutation? Mutation is a sudden change in DNA sequence. 7. What is a gene? A gene is a DNA fragment. 8. What is DNA? DNA is what contains the genetic information of living organisms. 9. What is a homologous structure? A homologous structure is a structure with similar organization but different function. 10. What is an analogous structure? An analogous structure is a structure whose organization is different, but its function is similar. Chapter 9. 1. Define microevolution. Microevolution is evolution on a large scale. 2. Define macroevolution. Macroevolution is evolution on a small scale. 3. Give an example of microevolution. The changes in allele frequency. 4. Give an example of macroevolution. Bird to reptile. 5. What is convergent evolution? Convergent evolution is when non-related species become more similar. 6. What is divergent evolution? Divergent evolution is when related species become more different from each other. 7. What is the cause of convergent evolution? Convergent evolution is due to the fact that the non-related species adapt in the same environment. 8. What is the cause of divergent evolution? Divergent evolution can be due to variations in biotic or abiotic factors. Chapter 10. 1. What is speciation? Speciation is the appearance of new species during evolution. 2. What is allopatric speciation? Allopatric speciation is when identical populations initially are separated geographically, they accumulate genetic differences over time, and become two distinct species. 3. What is sympatric speciation? Sympatric speciation is the formation of new species without geographical isolation. 4. What is the hybridization zone? The hybridization zone is the place of contact of two species. 5. What are the conditions necessary for speciation? The conditions necessary for speciation are genetic variability, reproductive isolation, and natural selection. 6. What influences genetic variability? Sexual reproduction, mutations, gene flow, genetic drift, and the transfer of horizontal genetic information. 7. What is genetic drift? Genetic drift is the random change of the frequency of alleles in a small population. 8. What can influence genetic drift? The founder effect and the bottleneck effect. 9. What is the founder effect? The founder effect is when one or a few individuals migrate and start a new isolated population. 10. What is the bottleneck effect? Bottleneck effect is the decrease in population due to a sudden change in the environment, such as natural disaster or human intervention. Chapter 11. 1. What are the barriers that promote reproductive isolation? Prezygotic barriers and postzygotic barriers. 2. Name the prezygotic barriers. The prevention of gamete fusion, ecological isolation, geographic isolation, behavioral isolation, temporal isolation, and mechanical isolation. 3. What is geographic isolation? Geographic isolation is when species live in different areas. 4. Give an example of a geographic barrier. A river is an example of a geographic barrier. 5. What is ecological isolation? Ecological isolation is when species live in the same area but different habitats, so they rarely meet. 6. What is behavioral isolation? Behavioral isolation is different species by their courtship display. 7. What is temporal isolation? Temporal isolation is when species breed at different times of the day or in different seasons. 8. What is mechanical isolation? Mechanical isolation is when structural differences between species prevent mating. 9. Name the postzygotic barriers. The postzygotic barriers are natural selection, non-viable or sterile hybrids. Conclusion. Thank you once again for listening to this book. I hope it has helped you gain more knowledge in evolution.